Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. If you are interested in improving your communication skills, your leadership development, and self-improvement overall, this is the podcast for you. My name is Roberta, and I'm your host. Today, I am joined by Perdita Andrews, a professional speaking coach currently based in France. And before I go any further, hi, Perdita.
Hi, Roberta.
Glad to have you here.
I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation as well. So what made a Canadian end up in France?
It's a great question and still somewhat of a mystery. I didn't actually have a plan. Audrey Hepburn has a famous quote that says, Paris is always a good idea.
Oh, I like that.
And I had never been to Paris before, and I was living in Canada, and I found myself with nothing really tying me down. And I had the really, really good fortune to have gone to a French immersion school as a child. So I started learning French from the age of 5. And the other good fortune that I have is that both of my parents are European. So I had a European passport. So I spoke the language, I had a passport, I had never been here. So I thought, if not now, when? And I just picked up and landed in Paris.
Yeah.
I didn't know a single person. I didn't have a job lined up. I just came here on an adventure, and it's been almost 10 years and I'm still here.
So it really is always a good idea.
I think so. I can't imagine the circumstances under which Paris would ever be a bad idea, but maybe I'm biased.
Well, based on experience, it seems like it. So you are a professional speaking coach. How did you get started on that?
This is also somewhat mysterious because I never set out to be a professional speaking coach, even to the terminology of professional speaking coach. I fell backwards into it. Like so many expats, I know that you know this just as well as I do. When I first moved to France, I started teaching English. I got a job as soon as I could, working at Berlitz as an English teacher. And
that company is also, sorry to interrupt you, is
okay.
Also has offices in South Korea. I have a friend who used to teach there. Yeah.
And I needed to get a job as soon as possible because I had decided to spend the summer just discovering whether or not I even wanted to stay here and not putting any pressure on myself to work immediately or anything like that. But there came a point when I needed to start working, and it seemed the most logical step. And I really connected with my students, and they started asking me if I would give private sessions to their friends and to their families. And so I started just giving private sessions. And the more that I started working, the more I developed my style, which became a very conversational style, a very conversational way of speaking. I'm not trained as an English teacher. As I mentioned, I went to French school. So there were moments when my students had grammar questions that eluded me. I can't immediately explain to you the difference between as and like. I just know when we use as.
That's how it is. Yes. Even
right?
For us who grew up speaking English, there are just some things when I was teaching, I would think to myself when they ask me, I never thought of that. I just know we say it like that.
That's right. That's right. And so I would look it up and I would be able to answer their questions. But over time, I really started to figure out who I was as a teacher and then who I was becoming as a coach. And I would start to tell new clients, listen, if you're looking for somebody that's really scholarly, really academic, I am not your girl. My sessions are to help you feel more comfortable, more fluid, to be more adept in a spontaneous conversation, and to raise your vocabulary, right? Because every time we have a conversation with somebody, we can teach them new words so that their vocabulary expands. Yeah, but it was never going to be, today we're working on the present perfect. I realized really quickly that wasn't who I was. And people responded to that, and my practice grew and grew. And then I started to hear, especially here in France, I started to hear people talking about how they were expected, especially in some of the bigger companies, to be able to present in English or present in English because that was the only common language, let's say in Europe, but they weren't getting any support. So they had a decent English level, but they weren't getting any support in terms of stage fright, effective presenting skills, communicating the ideas that they had in their head in French in the same way in English so that they would have the impact they were hoping for. And so I very organically developed a second service, which is the professional speaking coaching. So I do conversation coaching for people who want to maintain and expand their vocabulary. And then I also do professional speaking coaching, which is more event-based or project-based. So somebody they're pitching investors, for example,
Right.
and I help them prepare.
Well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So we have so many things in common, right? We're expats.
Right. It sounds exactly like what I do. It's almost like you're reading my mind. And imagine if English speakers themselves have to be trained on presentation skills. Because, you know, I have so many types of people when presenting with their slides. Some write novels, you know, we suggest bullet points so that people don't read your slide and not look at you, things like that. Stage fright, all of those things we cover with people who already speak the language. So it's a double whammy when you first have to translate.
100%. I mean, again, I feel like this conversation might just be you and I reading each other's minds because that's when I describe it in French, you know, when I explain to people the work that I do, I say exactly that. I say it's already extremely stressful for upwards of 80% of the population to speak in public, whether that public is 2 people or 2,000 people. But when you add that extra layer of having to do it in a language that's not your own, it becomes doubly terrifying, exactly what you said. And the other thing that is really important to me in the work that I do is that I've actually lived this experience myself, because I've had to present myself and my work in a language that's not my native language either. And I've had to wrestle with, okay, well, this is what my message is, and this is what my heart wants to say, and this is what lights me up. But is it translating? Am I using the correct words in French to really transmit the idea behind what I'm doing, not just the functionality of what I'm doing, but the ethos and the idea behind it. And because I've also lived that experience, my clients already feel that they're in a safe space to express their frustration, and to express their fears. I think, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. I think that when you're in that kind of a vulnerable setting with a consultant or a coach who is of your same language, but maybe they have a higher proficiency. Let's say that they're also a native French person, but the client believes they have a higher proficiency in English than they do. They're not going to feel safe. I think my impression of it is they feel intimidated. They feel they have something to prove. They feel they have to show that they are capable of speaking English. But when it's a foreigner who's had the same experience as they've had, it's just the inverse. They feel safer. They feel like they can really work on their true mindset issues and their true fears and their true worries in a way that is more effective ultimately.
What we find in our experience is the judgment becomes such a huge obstacle. People feeling judged makes them fearful. They even things they already know, they are not even able to articulate that. Because as soon as they feel judged, everything just, the survival instinct kicks in, everything just shuts down. So feeling judged because you feel like I'm not proficient enough in this language has been such a major obstacle, and one of the reasons why, despite how brilliant they are not able to show that.
Yeah, it's almost like, I love how you describe that, and it makes me think of judgment is like the gateway for self-doubt,
That's
you
what it
know?
is. Yes.
Like
Hmm.
as soon, it just exactly what you said, they start questioning their expertise. And that's something else that you touched on that's really important, is that, and I'm certain you've also seen this in your work, it's amazing when you see someone speaking about their expertise in their native language, and they can still be stressed out, and I'm not suggesting that it disappears, but you see the way they talk about, let's say they're talking about it in a really casual environment, maybe with you or maybe with me, right? In session, they're just
Hmm.
talking about their work, they're talking about their ambitions, they're talking about their successes, and you hear the way they talk about it and their body language, and then all of a sudden when you change the language, it's almost like it's a different person.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think it's fascinating that language can have that much of an effect on us.
Mm. It doesn't flow as much. And they start to, because here's the thing, as soon as you start speaking another language, you start to think to yourself, the self-doubt creeps in and think, am I using the right word for this context? Because that's the thing about language as well. The same word, the context might be different as soon as you translate. Or it
Yeah.
can be a one word in English can be used in different settings. And as soon as you use it in different language. So now if you're a non-English speaker and you have to translate your thoughts into English, you doubt, second guess yourself and think, is this the right context for what I'm trying to express?
Yeah. And then it goes one step further. At least I see this in my clients. And again, I'd love to hear if it's the same for you, because I do think it's quite fascinating, because we're operating in such similar manners, but in very different cultures, right? And what I see happens after that is then they, at least the clients that I work with, once the self-doubt creeps in, then they start to ask themselves, do I even have anything to say? Like, is it even worth it? Like, should I even, maybe I should just, and this, we spoke about this briefly just a little bit earlier, then they're not, raising their hand, then they're not sharing their ideas, they're not sharing their expertise all of a sudden. And that's what breaks my heart, is when you watch that process and you think, but you have such important information to share, it's impactful, it matters,
Mhm.
and you see people's self-confidence just break down. And
Immediately.
language,
Mm.
yes, and language for me should not be that kind of a barrier. Like, there are so many problems in the world that don't have solutions, or that don't have solutions that we can control. COVID is a perfect example, right? We
Right.
can't solve COVID, but the work that you and I do, that's a problem with a solution.
Mm.
Those people
Yes.
can share their ideas, they can share their expertise, they can make change and make impact.
It can be very transformative. I've seen it.
Yeah. And also it matters. I mean, imagine all the things we can learn from all these fascinating people,
There you go. So we are
you
the ones
know?
missing out just because they feel like the language barrier, they feel judged, the self-doubt creeps in, then they suddenly shut everything down we could have learned from them.
That's exactly right. And what a pity. How
Very,
sad is that?
very sad. It is.
Right?
It is. Yeah. It's funny you say that. I remember some of my students will say, and I'm talking about brilliant students, diligent, everything. They will say to me, if I, because we haven't heard from you today. What do you think about this? Roberta, teacher, my English is not very good. The first thing I'd say, you just spoke a perfect English sentence. How can you say that? My English is not very good. Perfect grammar, perfect everything. You just contradicted yourself.
I feel like you might be my twin on the other side of the world, because I really do. I really do. Because one of the things that I often, the stories that I often tell is the very first time that I meet a client, you know, we have a conversation, because if we're not a match, then it's never going to work. So the first time we just meet and we just talk, right? And I have my standard questions that I always ask, because I need to do a needs evaluation. I need to test a little bit their level, their comfort zone, etc. And one of the questions I often ask is, how many languages do you speak? And for example, they'll say, well, I speak French, of course, because they're French, and Spanish and German, and a little bit of Italian.
That's fine.
But I also look at them and I say,
oh, sorry, 4, yeah.
I look at them and I say, and they look at me with this like quizzical look on their face, and I say, what about English?
Since we are speaking in English right now.
And they say, oh, but I don't really speak. And I say to them, we just had an hour-long spontaneous conversation in English. You speak English. You speak English. But it's this perception. Like you said, it's the judgment. It's this perception that they have. And I have to mirror back to them and say, you just spoke English. Same as your story. I mean, that's why I think we're twins on the other side of the globe. I mean, they truly don't think they speak English. And I'm sitting there going, but
this is so interesting. Why do you think of all languages, this is the one language where people judge themselves so harshly, and it's held to such a high standard that unless I speak it perfectly, I shouldn't even count it as a language I speak?
Oh my gosh, Roberta, that's such a good question. And that's so beautifully put as well. And I think and it's the first time anyone's ever asked me that question. So it's going to take me a minute because I want to give you a thoughtful response. I want to give you a thoughtful response. And I think there are different parts to the answer. I think one part of the answer is how ubiquitous the English pop culture is. Music, movies, Hollywood, all of it, stardom, celebrity. And I also think that there is this, you know, it is, and then maybe the two of them are connected, but there is also this idea of this iconic, when you think of iconic cities, how many, or iconic centers, most of them are English, right? When you think of the iconic centers of the world, not all of them, but probably 60 to 70% of them.
Right.
Because, so I think that there's a connection to the two of them. I think there's the society and what we grow up with in culture, in pop culture. But then I also think there is something connected to success and money. Like when I talk about centers, I'm talking about kind of like the financial centers of the world, right? So I think there's, to be culturally successful or financially successful, people feel that they must be proficient, they must speak English. It's not a theory that I necessarily agree with, but it's what's coming into my mind when you ask that really, really, really important question, is why is the pressure so much heavier
than any other language? I would agree with you on that. And one of the reasons is, first of all, let me talk about my experience in South Africa. I'm Zulu by heritage, so I speak 2 languages fluently, Zulu and English. And I know that even Trevor Noah, I don't know if you know Trevor Noah.
Of course, I love him.
Yes, love Trevor.
He's easy on the eyes.
Joke where he's funny, he makes it about the French people. There's a joke where he says, because of accents as well. Remember, you have English, the language, then you have accents, depending which part of the world you find yourself in. We, unfortunately, in South Africa, not only does the world, when you step out into the world stage, are you judged based on you come from Africa, then they're going to judge your accent. And even back home, we actually do. If you don't sound English in the way you pronounce, then he says, then people perceive you as not as smart. he makes a joke about the word management. Some Black people back home will say management, and that's the accent. So when you say management and pronouncing the word, people think that, oh, this person is not very smart. And then he said, but here's the unfair part. If you are French and you're in a business meeting and say, my name is Jean-Pierre, I was just looking at the management of the company, and he's like, everybody will be like, oh, take me now, Jean-Pierre, take me now. It sounds romantic because this French accent is perceived a different way from an African accent. But they both say management, it's not the right word to pronounce the word management. So it's the which part of the world you find yourself in, and we judge accents as well. Some accents, in the way they speak English, they sound sexy. Some what we judge as, oh, that's how he speaks, he must not be very smart. And people know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I grew up, I grew up in a small city I grew up on the Atlantic Ocean in Canada. And there is a accent that comes from that part of the world. And instead of saying about, they say about.
I heard that in a movie. I thought it was just a joke.
It's true. Like, instead of saying, what did you do yesterday? Oh, we just went out and about. They would say, we went out and about.
Okay.
And I think that your point about accents too is so fascinating, because first of all, I can't remember the exact number. I think there are over 200 different English dialects, meaning different English accents, right? And the judgment that comes, and also the self-judgment, right, that comes. I often hear my clients, when I ask them what are their objectives, in the top 3 is to get rid of their accent.
Wow.
And I will tell you, as the daughter of my dad is British, and he lived in Canada for 40, maybe 45 years, and he never lost his British accent. So let's just look at that for a second, in terms of, I guess, what you might look at as a double standard. He was never judged for living in another country with an accent, right? He never tried to lose his accent, right? It was the same language. Why? Because he wasn't judged, right? And also because of the history, of course, that it gives you the King's English, it gives you an impression. But what I think is so interesting is, why is that different from anyone else? Why is that different from a French person who is obsessed, and I mean obsessed, about losing their accent?
Wow.
Why?
I need
if
to
you're
send
speaking
them to
correctly, yeah. If you're speaking correctly and you're communicating your ideas, why is the accent important? But I think it's to your point. I think it's because historically people, and I personally find it confounding, though I know it's true. It's exactly what you said. People judge other people on their accent. They make a determination about who they are and what their education is and what their intelligence is, purely based on their accent. Why was that different for my dad in Canada than it is for a French person in New York City?
Like you said, it's the King's language.
But then that's a whole other
discussion,
show,
not
right?
For
yeah,
for sure. That's true. It just saddens me when you say their first priority is to get rid of the accent.
And can I tell you an irony? Can I tell you what it goes back to the story about when they say they don't speak English and we've just spoken English. Yes. Then they then say to me that they love my accent when I speak French, and they find it adorable and charming. And I say to them, well, do you think I sound stupid when I speak French, or unintelligent? And they say, oh my gosh, no, not at all.
It's the same, the other side of the coin.
It is. And this is something, and this is why I'm really fascinated about the fact that we do the same kind of work in different cultures. And I'd love to hear more about what it's like in South Korea. Here, I can tell you 100% that it's systemic in France, and it starts in the French education system, which unfortunately is not very supportive, accepting, encouraging. That's just, it's a very rigorous. It's rigorous to the point of, you know, if you think of children, if you think of this as my clients when they were children in school, perfectionism was the goal. And my ethos in my work is communication, not perfection. But all the people that I work with, perfectionism was the goal in this very, very, very rigorous education system.
It's funny you should say that. In South Korea, when they started to have foreigners come in and teach English, because it's the global business language, right? First of all, in South Korea in general, and I love South Korean culture, perfection is a thing, not just how you speak, how you present yourself, always look your best, which is something we encourage, obviously, but there's just that little extra pressure of always looking your best all the time. That's why they carry makeup bags in the bag so that they always keep checking themselves, things like that. So perfection in how you look, perfection in, like I said, you just spoke a perfect English sentence and yet you're telling me you're not good in English, because they think there's something in there if I continue this conversation that's going to go wrong, and I don't want it to get to that point. So I'd rather tell the teacher now that this English conversation is not going to happen. That's the other perfection part. Then you have, this just reminds me of an exercise I was doing with my students. You know the group BTS, right? Global Phenomenon, K-pop group. I was showing them when BTS won the Grammy, they performed at the Grammys, and they had that Ellen interview. Now, RM, Rap Monster, he is the one that speaks English and he translates for the rest of the group. When they asked him how he got to learn English, he said, usually in Korea, you either go to what they call private academies, the after-school English programs to learn English after you finish your regular school, or you just do it different ways, learn English in different ways. So what he didn't go to academy, what his parents did was they bought him all 10 seasons of Friends. Just watch his Friends DVDs until he started speaking English. And so what happened was, I'm showing my students this. So before I did this, I said to them, why do we think we learn English? Because one of the things I always emphasize is English is not more important than Korean. I want you to understand that. We didn't come here just because English is better or more important. All your government is saying is, if you want to explore opportunities outside of South Korea someday in your adult life, just know that there's a world out there, and, you know, and the countries that are of interest to you most likely speak English, right? That's all that is. It is not more important than Korean. Let's just make sure we all understand that. Yes, teacher. Okay, good. And then secondly, I would ask them, why do you think you learned English? One of my favorite answers, my favorite female student, she said, teacher, I want to marry Justin Bieber. Okay, that should be point taken. Sorry, Hyunji, and it was Hyunji, so she can't marry Justin Bieber anyway. He's already a married guy. But like I said, I wanted to emphasize to them that it's not more important than your language. It's just for you to explore other opportunities, just in case you want to go outside South Korea someday when you grow up. And then I showed them those 3 BTS YouTube videos. And then I said to them, it's one of the ways in which you can use English to your advantage. However, you can still go through life living in South Korea, having a fabulous life, fulfilling everything you need without needing to be proficient in English just because Roberta teacher was here at some point. It's not about that. Because like we were saying, I think sometimes some people feel like the reason they counted the Italian, the German, the Spanish, and the French, and then count English, it's almost like on a different pedestal compared to other languages, and that is why people perceive everything else that way. It's almost like the benchmark, and then everything else is secondary.
Yeah,
And that's
it makes
every chance I had. That's what I used to emphasize to my students. Sorry, carry on.
no, it's so true, and I appreciate you saying that so much, because I personally don't want to live in a world where there's only one language spoken. I mean, is
No,
that where we're headed? No, I
what
think,
about my heritage language, Zulu?
of course, like, of course. So, and
Right.
I think that it makes me think of that mindset tool where it's not either or, but it's yes and.
Mm.
You know, it's not either Korean or English. You have to
You can
choose.
have it
It's yes
all.
and. Exactly.
Mm.
And I think that that's also, I think there's something really beautiful about people who are interested in learning English, not to lose their heritage or their culture completely, just to enrich their life, whatever that means to them, right? Whatever that means to them, whether it just means going to the cinema and watching, you know, having an original version film and not having to read the subtitles,
Right.
great. Or whether that means, you know, building an app and launching it worldwide. And who knows, it doesn't have to be, I think you said the words that you said were perfect, which is inferior or superior.
Mm-mm.
I don't see it in that way, and I see it as enriching, and I see it as connected to your values and your hopes and your dreams, whatever those are.
Hmm. Then what? Yes. Why should it be either or, and
Yeah.
everything else must take a backseat?
Yeah, and why, and there's nothing to say that it's less important. Any other language is somehow less important. And again, I am somebody who is, where I am not bilingual. I am fluent. I have lived here for long enough that I should be, but I'm not bilingual, and I still struggle. And for anybody who is familiar with French, you know, the French grammar is no joke. It is really, really hard.
I can
But
barely hear
I
diction. Yeah.
continue to pursue it because it enriches my life. It
Mm.
enriches my brain. It helps me communicate, you know, in a more fluently with my daughter, who is, luckily enough, she's naturally bilingual, but it helps me to communicate with her in both languages. I think it's not about English being superior. It is about enriching our lives. And for example, in Canada, we talk a lot about the Indigenous language disappearing. The Indigenous language is disappearing. And I find that heartbreakingly sad, because there's nobody to carry them on. There's nobody to teach them. And I do not want to live in a world where English becomes the only
The
language.
only one. Yeah. I don't think even most people want that.
I can't think of anything more depressing.
Mhm. This has been such an enriching experience, and more than anything, we have so much in common. It's scary.
I love it. I love it. I've never met somebody with whom I've had so much in common with. And the fact that you're on the other side of the world just makes me feel like, you know, the world is such a big and small place all at the same time.
All at the same time, right? Before you go, do you have a website or social media handle where people can
I
find you?
do. Yeah,
Mhm.
I do. Yeah, you can pretty much find me anywhere at Perdita Andrews. So my website is perditaandrews.com. LinkedIn, Instagram, Perdita Andrews. And I do also have a little cheat sheet guide on my website. It's called My Core 4 Principles for Successful Speaking. If anybody is interested, I actually have one of my core 4 principles is accept your accent.
Yes.
That's one of them.
And we discussed
Accept
that
it.
today. Mm.
That's right, because you'll never lose it. So just love it. Accept it and love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Perdita. It's been wonderful having you here. I feel like I found my twin.
I know, I love it. Thank you so much for having me. It was been really, really, really lovely talking to you.